If you've been seriously injured, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, will fight for the compensation you deserve if you become their client. All law firms are not the same. Morgan & Morgan is the biggest for a reason. They've won a lot. They don't settle for lowball offers from insurance companies. As America's largest injury law firm, they're all ready to take on insurance companies of every size. You can start a claim in just a click. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan by going to forthepeople.com/Pacman. The link is in the description. Panic is growing amongst the average American, both rich and poor, interestingly enough, about the economy, different situations, different levels of risk, of course. But if you are in a situation where you either feel like your wallet is getting thinner or that it's going to, or you're worried and you're starting to adjust spending habits, you are very much not alone. This is what is happening in the economy of the United States today. We are not in a recession. Recessions have specific definitions. We're not even close to reaching that yet because it requires GDP numbers, and we don't even have GDP numbers from Q4 yet, or do we? We're not going to have Q1 numbers. No, I think Q4 GDP comes out soon. We're not going to have Q1 numbers for some time. So we are not in a recession, but there is a decline in consumer confidence. Consumer spending has collapsed across all income levels. And Donald Trump is not even denying that his policies might tank the economy. He says it'll be for the greater good. His advisors say it will be only a transition. Peter Navarro said it's sometimes the pain you have to endure to go from failing Bidenomics to successful Trumponomics or Trumponomics or whatever. So let's look at what we know, what's true, and what is sort of like a maybe. It is true that Americans are cutting back on everything. Americans are being more careful on groceries, gas, and fast food. Wealthier individuals are being careful with luxury goods because people either don't have the money or are worried that they soon will not. We saw consumer spending drop by the largest single month margin between January and February. Big box retailers, Walmart, Costco, Target, have seen customers tighten spending, average ticket values, and different metrics that they track. Fast food sales are down, much to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s chagrin. Luxury spending also down almost 10% in February alone. And it's not about boo-hoo, people can't get their Rolex watches. It's that 10% is a significant chunk to see a decline in a single month. And again, this is affecting people across income ranges. Everybody's pulling back. And it's not about, oh, we feel bad for the people who might only be able to afford one yacht instead of two. No, it's simply when spending goes down at the broadest economic level, you lose demand side stimulus. The people who work at the companies at which less money is being spent now have jobs that they themselves have to worry about. And it does trickle down. You know, the tax cuts for the rich don't seem to trickle down. When spending declines, that does trickle down. We then look at tariffs. Trump's trade war is back in full force. Businesses are warning things are going to start costing more. We are seeing some early indicators of stalling wages. Low-income workers had that temporary boost after COVID, but earnings have now fallen behind the rich again in terms of change to wages. Savings is starting to dry up. Bank balances are shrinking. Debt is climbing to pre-pandemic levels and beyond. And as we've talked about, we already talked about Delta, already seeing JetBlue and American Airlines seeing fewer people booking flights in a forward-looking manner, which means people expect at some point in the future to be in a tougher economic situation. And then, of course, the big one, Trump has now been asked multiple times, are you ruling out a recession? And he doesn't rule it out. He says, I don't know that it's something I like to predict, even though he did when Biden was running. You're going to have a recession. Using different words, kind of like figuring out semantic arguments. And then he's out there bragging about the low egg prices. Now, you all know me, okay? Egg futures are down, and that is great to see. It is objectively a good thing because it was becoming a real problem in terms of what it suggested about broader grocery prices and inflation. But consumers aren't just being cautious because of egg prices. Consumers are worried they are going to run out of money. So when Donald Trump tells you, we're going to win on everything eventually, you might just need to suffer a little bit, but it'll be patriotic and it's going to be really great. Who really is winning? It is not American consumers. We already are seeing, if you put the picture together, increased debt, fewer flight bookings, because people tend to book months in advance. Some people book a trip a year almost in advance. I think you can't book flights more than 330 days in advance, but people sometimes will book 10 months in advance. Some people will book 2 days before. On average, I think it's like between 2 to 3 months early that people book flights. When you stop booking flights, which on average are for 2 to 3 months from now, it is a sort of futures market in that it is people acting today based on what they expect there to be in the future. When Trump announces a tariff and the stock market goes down, it's not because the tariff had that effect today. It's because it's a futures market about what the tariffs are expected to do. And similarly, when people say, I am not going to take the trip 3 months from now that I wanted to take, it is a futures market of the sort that people are saying, based on where I think I will be economically in 3 months, I'm not going to book the trip right now. So the winners are the people that always are the winners. It's the billionaire robber baron types who get to come in and buy assets cheaply, sometimes privatize stuff, get in early, get in low, and then benefit if and when things ultimately do recover. And we don't know if that will be because of a 180 that Trump does on tariffs or whatever the case may be. But the numbers aren't good. And there are people calling in tears about it. That's what I want to talk about next. A caller called into C-SPAN crying over what is happening to the economy. We have a couple callers we're going to listen to. Here is one who her fear is palpable. Listen to this.
For Social Security and Medicare as key targets, he said there will be steep reductions. Elon Musk said Social Security was a Ponzi scheme. I'm so scared once these things are gone, you're not going to be able to help because he's also ruining the stock market. So people who had a median income won't be able to help the people who have no food to eat. So please pay attention.
All right.
This is emblematic of what a lot of people are feeling. I know people whose jobs disappeared because of various funding cuts to U.S. aid. I know people in government roles who have been politely offered and then sort of encouraged to take one of these layoff severance type packages. I know people who are saying, I don't really know how we afford daycare in September if I don't find a way to replace my new job and replace it now. This is what is happening out there. And it's important to remember when Trump and whoever else says there's a greater good here, that the greater good may be there or may not be at the end of the rainbow. It's typically only there for the wealthiest. And this is why, as I've said before, at scale, if everybody who's sane leaves Mississippi, Mississippi just gets more insane. At the same time, who am I, living in a blue state, to say to a Mississippian who's looking around saying, we have a disastrous economy, we have disastrous education, and what Trump is doing is only hurting us more. Who am I to say, no, you've got to stay and fight so Mississippi will be better? Go to Connecticut, right? I mean, go to Maryland, go to Massachusetts. Who am I to say? And so this is like the conflict between the social good and the need to do what's best for you and for your family. And you could hear the fear in that caller's voice. Here's another caller explaining how the tariffs are starting to impact parts prices already.
Just like in 30 days. I mean, domestically, he's tanking the economy single-handed with the tariffs. And I just got a new heater today. I'm already affected by the tariffs.
How's
It's
that,
already
Richard?
been affected. The parts are, they say up 8 to 10% already, just in parts for the heater. So I ended up getting a new heater. But
The company told you that? The company that you bought it
Yeah.
from? Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they
already.
passed on that 8 to 10% to you. So you paid an extra. Okay.
That's how it works.
Yeah, and this is for every kind of part from outside the country, and no matter what it is. I mean, that includes everything that comes to the United States, to these tariffs that he's imposed.
That is how tariffs work. That is how tariffs work. If you have a product that you sell for $1,000 and all of a sudden your costs go up by 10%, so it costs you 10% more to make that product to try to keep your same profit margin, which of course you need to keep the lights on, pay employees, etc., you will now pass along the increased cost to the consumer. That's the way that this works. And of course, you might be saying, well, you can't do that indefinitely. At some point, it becomes unsustainable. And the answer is that's exactly right. At some point, something has to break. Either that is no longer a product that's financially viable for you to sell, or people can no longer continue affording it. That is the way it works. And so it's very interesting to listen to these C-SPAN calls because they really break down at an individual level the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the economy. Now, not exactly a profile in courage. Some Republicans are speaking out against the tariffs, but it really is too little too late. I want to talk about that. It sort of finally happened. Not really a profile in courage, but Senator Mitch McConnell, a Republican, the guy who defended and enabled Donald Trump for years, defended him through scandal after scandal, made sure that Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick sailed through the Senate. Suddenly, when he's got nothing to lose, he's not running for re-election, he finds his spine and decides that tariff policies they're really bad. Mitch McConnell is torching Trump's economic agenda. Yes, specifically the tariff stuff. And this is a big deal, not because Mitch McConnell is some kind of economic genius or a beacon of integrity. He's certainly not. But he is, at least for now, one of the most powerful Republicans in the country. And he is openly rejecting Donald Trump's economic strategy. Take a listen to this.
Former President Trump has proposed a 200% tariff on John Deere tractors if they're made in Mexico. Are you concerned that some of these tariff proposals by the GOP nominee could drive up costs for consumers or hurt urban exporters in Kentucky, for example?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of tariffs. They raise the prices for American consumers. I'm more of a free trade kind of Republican that remembers how many jobs are created by the exports that we engage in. So
now, Mitch McConnell has never really liked Donald Trump, if we're honest. He tolerated Trump. He used Trump to the extent that he could, and Trump used Mitch McConnell to the extent that he could. This is about something else. This is about Republicans realizing that Trump's economic agenda is a disaster and it'll be bad for their constituents. Remember, this is not a pejorative. I'm not being insulting. Red state economies on average are much less dynamic than blue state economies. You look at Nebraska and Oklahoma and you say, what industries do they have? And then you look at California, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, you say, what industries? The number of industries important to states are larger. It's a larger number in blue states than red states. And so Trump's entire economic pitch is, of course, he's a business mastermind and all of that stuff. And so these tariffs are going to be great. But these tariff policies consistently hurt American consumers. And if you're from a state that has one major industry supporting the economy, and that industry is going to get hurt, be it farming, be it whatever, it's a real problem. We've been through this before because Trump imposed tariffs in his first term, and it didn't work very well. And Mitch McConnell knows it. Republicans know it. But for 8 years, they've sort of let Trump push this nonsense. 4 years while he was in office, 4 years while he was out of office, and Biden was president. And now that Mitch McConnell is retiring, he has no races left to run. He can say what's obvious to everybody, and it's all kind of a joke. This is, sadly, the Republican Party in a nutshell. Silent when it matters, complicit when it's convenient, and suddenly honest when there are no more consequences. And it's a little bit about the broader split in the Republican Party, too. You've got the donor class Republicans, the corporate wing. They hate Trump's trade policies. The people who actually fund Republican campaigns do not want tariffs. They want free trade. And with Mitch McConnell speaking out, maybe other Republicans will follow, but the theme has been they only speak out when they have nothing left to lose. The question, of course, is, do Trump supporters care? Or are they just going to brush this off as the swamp attacking their guy? Mitch McConnell's a rhino and whatever. We know the answer thanks to Trump attacking Mitch McConnell for years now, which is he has already turned his followers against Mitch McConnell. And this is essentially what always happens. Trump does something dumb or economically ill-advised. Republicans stay quiet. And then when it's too late, they all act shocked. That's where we are. We will see where it lands. Hopefully there will be more of these Republicans. Remember that my first nonfiction book, first and last, I don't know, first nonfiction book, The Echo Machine, is publishing in just 9 days, 10 days. There are a limited number of signed copies available from Brookline Booksmith. This is it. Brookline Booksmith is starting to ship them out now. I already signed 700 of these. My hand almost fell off. It was wild. They have a few left. You can get one at davidpakman.com/booksmith. Of course, you can also get it on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kindle, audiobooks, all of that stuff. And you can call any local bookstore and they will get the book for you. The Echo Machine from Beacon Press. Very exciting stuff. We are hoping the book does well, and we will take the quickest of quick breaks and be right back. When you are seriously hurt, your injury could be worth a lot of money. Our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, does not settle for lowball offers. They let you find out how much your case could be worth online in just a couple of minutes. In the past couple of months alone, Morgan & Morgan saw verdicts of $12 million in Florida. That's 34 times the highest insurance offer they had gotten. $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. $6.8 million in New York, 25 times the highest insurance offer. Their fee is absolutely free unless you win. Personal injury lawsuits serve a crucial role. When you suffer an injury that someone else caused, you could be left with huge medical bills, lost wages, other expenses that simply should not be your responsibility. The change to your life could range from a mere inconvenience to something you aren't even sure you can crawl out from. Either way, that is why personal injury lawsuits exist. You, the plaintiff, can hold the negligent party accountable, get the compensation you deserve and need. Did you know you can start a claim with America's largest injury law firm in just a click? It is so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Pakman or click the link in the description. The David Pakman Show depends directly on your support to do what we do. Thank you to everyone who has signed up for a membership recently at joinpakman.com. It's not just philanthropy. You do get some great perks with your membership, including the daily bonus show, commercial-free audio and video streams of the show every day, hours before the show is publicly released, and much more. Get your membership at joinpakman.com. Takes about a minute with average computer skills, is the way I like to explain it. And you can use the coupon code NOTAGAIN to save about 50% off of the cost of a membership. Donald Trump is creating a recession out of thin air. It takes some skill to do this. Recessions typically arise from complex economic factors, financial crises, a shock to supply, global events beyond any individual's control. But the current economic precarity, the precipice of a recession on which we are, we're not in a recession yet, but there are growing concerns that we will be. It really relates directly to Trump's actions, showcasing really a unique form of detrimental incompetence. Historically, recessions are triggered by, for example, the 2008 financial crisis, excess debt in the housing market, bad loans made with little documentation led to a global financial meltdown. Other times, it would be like the asset bubbles of 2001. The 2001 contraction was an asset bubble in tech stocks. It was referred to as the dot-com bubble burst. Supply shocks are another possibility. You look at the 1970s, where there was a recession because of oil price shocks, where steep increases in oil prices led to a decline in aggregate demand. In 2020, remember around COVID, there was this very brief downturn where fundamentally it was about the shutdown of economic activity. The current recession, if there is one, we are not there yet, would be largely self-inflicted through Donald Trump's erratic policies. The aggressive implementation of tariffs on trading partners, unforced error. This includes significant imports on import taxes on Canadian steel and aluminum. That raises consumer prices there, reduces spending, bad for the economy. This creates uncertainty among businesses. So you delay an investment or you wait on hiring people. And when you look at Trump's approach, varied tariffs on different people, federal hiring freezes, mass government layoffs, withdrawal from international commitments, it's erratic. And it's a sort of shock therapy strategy that shifts from public to private spending in a lot of areas and also causes instability. We have not really seen this in modern economic history. It is a rare thing that a president's actions become the primary catalyst for a recession. Usually it's long-term economic trends, a global pandemic, a global commodity market alteration or shock. And so one of the things that's important to remember is that on the one hand, I'm careful on the show not to even give credit or blame to presidents when something doesn't have much to do with them. As many of you know, with gas prices now for more than a decade, go back to George W. Bush, I have made clear presidents can do very little on gas prices. We have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which can temporarily reduce prices if accessed somewhere around 15 cents a gallon. You can do a gas tax holiday, which is a very brief thing. But for the most part, we are talking about global circumstances. Presidents can convince oil-producing nations to cut supply or to increase supply, right? But for the most part, gas prices aren't because of a president. High, low, good, bad. It's mostly not because of a president. We are reminded by what's going on right now. The current situation really kind of highlights that presidents can impact economic stability, especially when they start to deviate from established norms and create uncertainty. So we are not in a recession right now. I hope we don't get there. We're in a period of erratic instability, but it is, if it becomes that bad, a product of Donald Trump's own making. Europe is going directly after the red states over Donald Trump's tariffs. Trump picked a fight with Europe, and they are hitting back hard. But the twist is that they are trying to make the pain land mostly in Republican states. This is very interesting. And this is what happens when Trump plays tough on trade without a real plan. Trump's slapping these tariffs on steel and aluminum from Europe. And in response, the EU is dropping billions in counter tariffs on American goods, but they're being very careful about exactly what they are going after. They are going after soybeans from Louisiana. They're going after beef and poultry from Kansas and Nebraska. They're going after produce from Alabama and Georgia and Virginia. Really red states, Virginia sometimes the exception, depending on whether you're talking local or national elections. Georgia did vote for Biden in 2020, but generally a red state. And meanwhile, the blue states, Europe is not targeting. Why? Because our allies know that this is a Trump problem. This is not an America problem. On the bonus show a couple days ago, producer Pat and I talked about how my experiences in Canada, in Europe recently, even in South America, people's reaction when they hear that I'm from the United States is not to go, oh, you bastards with the Trump stuff. It's to assume I'm not party to it. I'm not part of it. I'm not supportive of it. And of course, they're correct when it comes to Trump. But the idea here is that Europe is doing what it can to avoid hurting the states that didn't vote for this nonsense. Now, of course, it's a little bit, that there are people who voted for Harris in red states, and there are people who voted for Trump in blue states. What was it? 35, 40% of Texas voted for Harris. 35, 40% of Massachusetts voted for Trump. But there's probably no more accurate shorthand other than maybe, cities and rural. But what the European Commission is trying to do is say tariffs are bad for everybody. They raise prices, they kill jobs, they make the economy more unstable. American businesses seem to agree. Chamber of Commerce is begging for negotiations. Trump doesn't care. He did this in the first term. The tariffs didn't work out well. So now the EU is rolling out these counter tariffs in phases. First, they're bringing back old tariffs from the last Trump trade war. Then they're slapping new ones on $20 billion in American exports next month. And the reality is that Trump's so-called America First policies are leaving American workers last. That's who really suffers here. And the European Union was ready. Red states were not. So soon, you're going to start hearing from angry, furious Republican lawmakers saying farmers are furious with us. Factory workers are furious with us. Business owners are furious with us. Now, there's another aspect to this, and this is so important to understand. One reason that tariffs hit red states harder is that many red states rely on one or sometimes two key industries. And on average, blue states have more diversified economies. Look at Nebraska and Kansas. Agriculture. That's the dominant industry, period. When tariffs hit beef, poultry, soybeans, there is nowhere to hide. West Virginia, heavily dependent on coal. If coal struggles, West Virginia struggles. Now compare that to California. California has tech, entertainment, agriculture, and manufacturing. Compared to New York, finance, media, tourism, major drivers of the economy. Massachusetts, biotech, robotics, AI, healthcare, higher education, finance, insurance, tourism, defense, aerospace, and manufacturing. If one sector takes a hit, there are other industries to absorb the impact. And this is why Donald Trump's reckless policies trigger the economic retaliation, and red states end up feeling the pain more directly. They do not have the same economic safety nets that blue states do. Trump got his tough guy moment. It ignores the fact that his voters are going to be the ones paying for it, but he got his moment. This is not a show where we normally talk about reality TV, but I'm going to play a clip for you here of a show called Love is Blind. Right-wingers are melting down because an apparent anti-vaccine homophobe got rejected by his bride-to-be for being a right-wing nut. I'm so sorry to use this shorthand. They are furious about this. They are absolutely furious. So just stick with it. We're going to play the beginning of Sarah telling her fiance, I guess, I don't even know how these shows work, that she's not going to marry him. And eventually we find out it's about the politics. Take a listen.
I love you so much. But I've always wanted a partner to be on the same wavelength. And so today I can't.
Ooh.
I'm sorry, but I don't want that to be misunderstood. I still love you and everything about you is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I care about you so much.
I care about you too. And I love you so much. And I know I want to stay with you and keep growing our relationship if you'll let me.
We'll see. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so then we skip ahead in this thing, and the contestant is with her family in a car and starts to explain what this is about.
And I just like... What? I just hope I made the right decision.
Hi guys.
Oh my goodness.
Love you.
We love
too.
you.
It was a lot, but we're We're rolling with it. I just want to talk to her. Yeah.
Was it like the time frame?
I mean, I knew the whole time coming into this, the time frame, like, that's not, like, I feel like I know him. Like, really.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, like, I asked him about, like, Black Lives Matter, and I'm no expert. But, like, when I asked him about it, he was like, I guess I never really thought too much about it. That affected me, especially in our own city. Like, how could it not? How did it not make you think about something? I asked him, too, like, what his church's views are, and he said he didn't know. And so then I watched a sermon online.
From his church?
About, sexual identity.
Okay.
And it was traditional. I told that to Ben. And he doesn't really have much to say about it, you know? I want him to think about that stuff. Sometimes I did wonder if it was surface, fun, carefree love that we had. Equality, religion, the vaccine.
Okay.
I love you.
So right-wingers are just losing their minds over this. Some are saying, good for him, he dodged a woke bullet. And others are saying, this is crazy. Look at these crazy liberals. Listen, here's the bottom line. I've spoken about this before. It seems to me that if a couple has a disagreement as to what the tax rate should be, or even if one person is a libertarian who wants no taxes and says taxes are theft, or someone wants a flat tax, or those seem like completely reasonable differences on issues of policy. But there are issues that go further than that, and it seems completely reasonable to me that maybe it's just not a good fit in some of these things, because policy preferences are not the only aspect to politics. What was her name? Sarah. What Sarah is talking about here is that Ben's core beliefs may be morally different than hers on equity, on perspectives of how others should be treated. And when you don't have those shared values, it starts to affect, well, if we raise kids and we don't have the shared values, what happens? If we are engaging in a society and we have completely different views about societal issues, can we really get beyond that? And so would it be crazy to end a relationship over a disagreement on tax policy or, even other issues? Yeah, if it's a great relationship and there's chemistry and all of it, that seems to me like it maybe is a bit much. But the concept that, love conquers all ignores that there are some deep ideological differences that can cause resentment and conflict and erode respect for each other. And you know what? Sarah figured that out. So now Sarah can go and find a different relationship, and Ben can go and find a different relationship. And this isn't cancel culture. This isn't anything like that. This is, you know what? Maybe they saved themselves a bunch of later problems by Sarah figuring this out right now. It's the free market of ideas, and this is where she's choosing to spend her proverbial money. These MAGA people have got to relax. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. I want to tell you the truth now about why Donald Trump and MAGA cannot accept the facts on so many basic issues. Last week, I mentioned that part of the reason that they don't accept the facts on climate change or on tariffs or on many other issues is because they know that if they did accept the facts, their political positions would be not only illogical, but in some cases would be completely immoral. Accepting certain facts would force them to question their own policies, and they can't afford to do that. Now, I will explain what I mean. Take climate change. For years, Republicans resisted acknowledging that climate change was real, not because they truly thought 99% of climate scientists are in on some grand conspiracy, but because admitting it would mean confronting the obvious conclusion that we have to act. We have to do something. And since their donors make billions from oil and gas and their base doesn't want to hear about cutting emissions, or maybe I shouldn't have my huge gas guzzling SUV, the only way to avoid dealing with that is to pretend that there's nothing to deal with. If you accept that, yes, the climate is changing and humans have an impact, doing nothing and continuing to oppose renewable energy transition and getting away from fossil fuels, it would be immoral. So their solution is to not acknowledge it. Now, here's another example, immigration. If they admit, all right, you know what, it's true. Immigrants don't commit more crime than native-born citizens. Both documented and undocumented immigrants commit crime at lower rates than native-born Americans. They do help the economy. If you acknowledge that, suddenly the entire justification for draconian border policies falls apart. It wouldn't mean, oh, everybody gets to stay here illegally. But what it would mean is, listen, we can't do everything. We have limited resources. Undocumented immigrants who commit violent crimes would be a priority for deportation. But people who are working, paying into the system, have done nothing wrong other than being here, they suddenly wouldn't be a priority to go find, wind up and deport. You would focus in other areas. So if you acknowledge that migrants aren't an existential threat, it's harder to justify locking up kids in cages or spending billions on a pointless border wall. So instead, what they do is they flood right-wing media with crime stories featuring specific undocumented immigrants, even though at a societal level, we know that immigrants commit less crime than native-born Americans. MAGA has built an entire movement around the idea that Trump must have won in 2020. Why is that? Why won't they just acknowledge the facts? Because admitting that Trump lost fair and square in 2020 would mean acknowledging that maybe they aren't a majority. Maybe their ideas aren't so popular. Maybe the policies aren't what most Americans want. And if they admit that, then suddenly they can't justify voter suppression, gerrymandering, their obsession with election integrity laws that just make it harder for people to vote. It's the same pattern over and over again. You accept reality, that leads to uncomfortable policy debates, which means that simply denying reality is easier. Now, I do want to be objective here. This applies to the left on some issues. I'll give you an example. If the COVID vaccine does prevent catching or spreading the virus, there are many rules that are justifiable with regard to mandates. The original COVID vaccine against the original strain did seem to do that. It prevented you from catching it, and if you didn't catch it, you couldn't spread it. As the virus changed, and so did the vaccines, they certainly still worked to prevent death. They certainly still worked to prevent hospitalization, but they did not prevent catching or spreading the virus. Once that was the reality, the justification for mandates in certain places for the COVID vaccine became weaker. Still something that I got, still something that I recommend. I'd rather have a lower shot at hospitalization or death. But the point here is sometimes resisting the facts is a way to avoid an uncomfortable reckoning with policy. So what's the point here as far as MAGA is concerned? You can't reason with MAGA on facts alone because they know that once you establish the facts, you can't justify the policies. That's why climate change has to be a hoax. That's why immigrants have to be disproportionately criminals. That's why Trump had to have won in 2020, because the moment they admit the truth, their entire political justification collapses. Taxes cut on the rich and corporations. It's another great example. If the average person hears, hey, half the country would have to go into debt to cover a $400 expense or whatever the numbers are, it sounds immoral to cut taxes for the rich and corporations. They swoop in with trickle down and they go, no, 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 no. If you cut taxes for the so-called job creators, the rich people and the corporations, them having more money will trickle down to everybody. If you acknowledge that that's completely fabricated, You can't possibly morally justify tax cuts for the rich and corporations when so many average Americans, if they get a $200 blown out tire they need to replace, they have to put that on a credit card and start paying interest on it. So they deny reality. And where this puts us is that we end up stuck in an endless cycle where even agreeing on reality is impossible, because reality is the biggest threat to MAGA's entire existence. I have a chapter in my book called What Are Facts? As distinguished. So you've got the question, what are the facts? The facts might be, here's the change to global temperatures and blah, blah, blah. But then there's a question, what are facts? Because the other aspect to this is the MAGA right saying, what you're presenting as a fact is only your opinion. And I have a different opinion. Sometimes I call it an alternative fact. So that's an important issue. We saw this front and center in Sam Cedars' recent 20v1 Jubilee thing, where they just won't even come to the table on the facts. He was arguing with some kid who was like, oh, the whole point of DEI is tax cuts for government agencies when they hire black people. And Sam goes, government agencies don't pay taxes. They don't get tax cuts. They're funded by taxes. And the guy's like, no. Well, if he were to have acknowledged, actually don't remember if it was a guy or a girl, if that person had acknowledged, okay, yeah, it's true, government agencies don't really pay taxes, the entire opposition to DEI as a way for government agencies to get tax cuts evaporates. So this is really a problem. This leads back to the lack of critical thinking, lack of media literacy, and so on. But as I spoke about last week with Bill Adair, one of the reasons that they resist the facts are that the facts point to some unsustainable policy positions, and they just don't even want to face it, so they won't even agree with you on the facts. How do we get out of that? If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the Daily Bonus Show, the commercial-free Daily Show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, let's get into Friday feedback for the week. Remember that you can write to info@davidpakman.com if you have any message you would like to deliver. We will also look at YouTube comments, Twitter responses, TikTok, Instagram, the David Pakman Show subreddit. You never know what will end up featured here. First is a message that came through from Instagram, and this is an ugly one. Here's a guy who wrote and said, I'm watching your episode on YouTube where you said Biden is the most successful president in 50 years. This is stupidity at its finest. Biden didn't do anything but make this country worse than it is. Go back to 2020 to 2024. The economy was doo-doo, and we had the worst border ever, and we had drag Quinns messing with children. I ask you, what the fudge were you thinking? Biden is the worst, and you know it, Pakman. And of course, understand that these people never have any facts. If I were to try to make such an argument, I would say, here's how the unemployment rate was worse then, and the stock market was doing worse, and inflation was worse, and job creation was worse. But 2 months into Trump's presidency, what we see is that despite messages like this, it was doo-doo, it was poopy, it was bird poop during Biden. What we see is that the strong stock market growth of the Biden administration has been replaced with one of the most erratic stock markets with some of the worst weeks in years already. We saw inflation start to tick up. We saw job creation decline significantly. We are starting to see strained, if not cracked, relationships with historical allies. So if your case is so strong, sir, make it with facts, make it with data, and resist the ad hominems, and then maybe you'll be taken a little bit more seriously. Joe G wrote on YouTube, the elephant in the room. This is about the woman who voted Trump and then lost her job thanks to Doge. Joe says, the elephant in the room. Is she regretful of her vote because she got fired? Would she have spoken against MAGA if she was still employed? And of course, that is a completely fair question. There are lots of people, this is not exclusive to the right, but there's a lot of them on the right. There are a lot of people who only care insofar as something affects them. And it would be a great question for Riley if she appeared on this show. Is it only because you got fired that you now disapprove of what's been done? But if you had been able to keep your job and otherwise everything was the same, would you be as upset as you claim to be? Totally reasonable question. Ville Hittinen says 49 months of positive job growth, and it took less than a month to tank it. Pretty remarkable. Job growth for February did come in well short of estimates. There was still job growth, minimal, but it did come in very, very shy of estimates. One of the things I hope to get an answer to is, on what day does it become Trump's economy? Because for now, Maria Bartiromo says, yes, there's a recession coming, but it is going to be Trump's recession. Trump says, yes, egg prices are sky high, but that's thanks to Joe Biden. My question is, on what day can we finally say this is now Trump's economy, and we can keep, it's not about blame or credit, but we can hold Trump accountable for what takes place in this economy? Let me know the date. Is it April 1st? Is it May 1st? Is it next year? Or is the answer, when anything good happens, it's Trump's economy. When anything bad happens, it's Biden's. Tiffy Kitty commented on YouTube, I lost my job during the Trump COVID disaster, and I've lost my job again because of Trump's tariffs. I had a job during the entire Biden administration. This is an anecdote. We recognize that this is an anecdote, but imagine losing your job twice thanks to the same president. Now, of course, the COVID disaster and those job losses, a lot of them aren't Trump's fault, but I feel terribly for Tiffy Kitty. This is absolutely horrible. Kurt Blachnick says on Facebook, there is a reason why Warren Buffett cashed out a lot of stocks. Cash heavy now, will be in good shape when the market crashes. Money to buy stocks with at low prices. Yeah, listen, I don't follow what Warren Buffett does, his day-to-day moves. This is a market timing idea, okay? What Kurt is suggesting is get into cash now so that you'll have cash available to buy stocks on the cheap when the stock market continues crashing. 2 comments on this. This is not financial advice. This is just my philosophy, and I've talked about it before. This is a form of market timing. I don't think I'm smart enough, good enough, or good looking enough. Gosh darn it. No, I don't think I'm intelligent or well-versed enough to properly time the market. It seems incredibly shaky, but I don't know where we're going to be in 15 days or 30 days or whatever. So I don't do any of this market timing. What I do is I identify how much cash do I want. For my asset allocation, maybe it's 10 to 12% of assets. And then I just maintain the asset allocations that are appropriate for the levels of risk I've chosen to accept. And so when you start toying around with, I think the market will go down, so I'll hoard cash, and then when the market does go down, I'll put all my money in. A lot of money is lost this way because it's very hard to know when the bottom is. People keep waiting, and sometimes they miss stock market run-ups. Something like 50% of stock market gains each year come from the 10 best trading days. Are you confident that you're going to know when those best 10 trading days are? Maybe you are, I'm not. And so I simply dollar cost average in twice a month, somewhere around the 1st of the month, somewhere around the 15th of the month. Will I miss some dips where I could have gotten in a little cheaper? Yes. But I have the confidence of knowing I'm not going to miss those 10 biggest days of the year. So I don't recommend dollar cost averaging. I don't recommend timing the market. I recommend dollar cost averaging. Maybe Warren Buffett is smart enough and he's got enough money to play with that he can do it. Peace and love, but not for me. far abbreviations posted on the subreddit. I miss the daily voicemails. Writing, I miss the wacky voicemails and David's commentary around them. I didn't like listening to the Friday call portion, even though I was someone who called in, but I do miss the voicemails, especially if there is a shorter 45-minute show. I'm not aware of any shorter 45-minute shows. I understand why they aren't included in hour or longer shows. Yeah, I'm not aware of any show that's 45 minutes, interestingly. Listen, we have something like 12,000 unlistened to voicemails. At this point, I'll actually tell you the exact number. At this point, I would suggest, 14,000. We have moved away from voicemails, so don't feel inclined to continue leaving them. We got very little pushback about cutting the voicemail segment. Most people didn't like it. And interestingly, the show has grown faster than ever since we cut those calls and voicemail segments. So overall, it does seem like the right decision. And I stand by it, gosh darn it. Kathy Chase Hamilton says on Facebook about Trump not wearing his reading glasses, it's definitely a vanity thing. Glasses will make him seem weak. Yeah, it's funny. Trump is more worried about how he looks with glasses than about appearing to be unable to read. And as we talked about last week, I don't know if Trump struggles to read. It certainly seems like he does. At the same time, we've speculated, is part of this the result of Trump not wearing reading glasses that he should be wearing? Trump prefers not wearing glasses and people questioning whether or not he can read. On the Zelensky not wearing a suit issue, Susan wrote on Facebook, Americans have no problem with Zelensky not wearing a suit. How does Musk address when he goes to the White House? Yeah, of course it's a double standard, as Susan is pointing out. We were treated to, or subjected to, maybe better said, a sanctimonious scolding of Vladimir Zelensky by J.P. Mandel, because he wasn't wearing a suit in the Oval Office. And Brian Glenn and others did the same. But Elon Musk was at a cabinet meeting in a T-shirt with a big hat. This is just hypocrisy. It's a double standard. It is just completely fabricated and contrived, and we shouldn't pay any more attention to it than we already have. All right. We're just days away from the release of my book. And as I've mentioned before, the signed copies of the book have been available at Brookline Booksmith through davidpakman.com/booksmith. We got about 800 orders for signed copies. The plan right now is that Booksmith is going to have me sign 1,000 when I go up there. And then the extras will just be available until they run out. So of the 1,000 copies of the book that I will be signing, 800 roughly are spoken for. If you'd like one of the remaining couple hundred, go to davidpakman.com/booksmith. Please, please, please remember, because the books are going to start shipping soon. The more reviews we can get on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, which costs nothing to review the book, the better the book is going to do. So once you get the book, once you can accurately review it, please start leaving those reviews. We're kind of shifting from week 1 into weeks 2 to 4 publicity, which are tough weeks because all those pre-orders count for week 1. So make sure to leave a review, get the Kindle version, get the audiobook version. All of these versions are important, but the signed copies only at davidpakman.com/booksmith. We will see you on the bonus show in a moment. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. If you've been seriously injured, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, will fight for the compensation you deserve if you become their client. All law firms are not the same. Morgan & Morgan is the biggest for a reason. They've won a lot. They don't settle for lowball offers from insurance companies. As America's largest injury law firm, they're all ready to take on insurance companies of every size. You can start a claim in just a click. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan by going to forthepeople.com/Pacman. The link is in the description.